Hey folks, Katya here. I wanted to talk to you today, address the subject of formulas. So there are so many books and teachers out there, workshops, lectures, etc., talking about giving the perfect formula, whether it be in the realm of diet or exercise or a self-care routine or productivity, right? Whatever our realm where we want to change something and get results in a certain area, business, right? The whole idea of biohacking. Many of us have gotten on that train, and it's all part of this self-betterment project. And what I want to speak to today is this phenomenon of, we find a formula, we kind of expect it to, because usually when we find it, if we find a formula and we feel really great about it, it's because it's working really well, right? So in that kind of initial time, we might feel like, oh my God, I want to do this forever. And what we're getting attached to is not the formula, but the results that we're seeing. Something in us is responding really well. And the reason that's happening is because that formula is working to balance out something that was imbalanced before. And we're not wrong for becoming imbalanced. In fact, it's part of life to swing in one direction or the other kind of all the time, because if you think about it, perfect balance. What is perfect balance? It would be stasis, which is not life. It's a dead state. And even death itself isn't static. So we find a formula, it works because it's balancing out an imbalance that we had before, and we start to feel amazing. However, over time, we actually start to change. We're not imbalanced in the same way we were before because we've brought ourselves into balance. But if we go really far and continue in that direction, the mind is still attached to that formula. It thinks that it's the cure-all. It thinks that it's the solution and the panacea. So we continue in that direction because the mind is attached to it. But what happens is oftentimes we actually start to go imbalanced in that other direction. And at that point, we wonder to ourselves, why isn't this working? Why am I having irresistible cravings for carbs? Why am I wanting to just like chill out in a flotation tank when I've promised myself that I'm going to weight train really intensively every day? And that used to work so well for me and make me feel amazing. And now all I want to do is, I'm exhausted, all I want to do is float or go to a yin class. So what we need to realize then is that the mind is a tool. It's a part of us, but it's not all of us. We are so much bigger than we can ever imagine. And the mind is a tool that we can use, but oftentimes what happens is that we get used by it because it gloms on and becomes kind of obsessive about a thing, and it's still attached to this idea that there's a solution. Can you imagine that if there was one? Can you imagine what it would be like if there was one solution? Would life actually be a journey? Would it be the ride that it is? It's only what it is because there is no solution. Anything that we find works for a time, and then it's time to move on to something else. We get into trouble when we start to feel bad about ourselves or guilty because we didn't stick to some diet or to some plan that somebody else usually made up. We have to remember that that plan, that formula came from that person's mind. And the mind is limited to what it already knows. Whereas intuition gets in touch, gets information from, receives information from every part of us, the soul, the body, the emotions. When we just know, we are receiving information and somewhere in that discernment intelligence that we have, the intelligence to discern, we recognize that even though we would have never thought of this, even though it may not even make sense in our minds, this thing is exactly what we need right now, right? So it's the idea that the mind, if we look for solutions in the mind, we're only going to be looking into a very limited pool of what we already know. But if we look to solutions or for solutions from our intuition, from our intelligence that is beyond the mind, we're reaching into an infinite pool. We're reaching into the collective consciousness. And at that point, our resources are really, really infinite. So there's actually a quote, Albert Einstein said this, of course, that logic will take you from point A to point B, but imagination will take you anywhere. Same idea here. So if you can imagine that in living life, we're driving a car, right? And sometimes the terrain is just like so soothing. You're not even doing anything. It's like passive. You're driving on a country road. The speed limit is like 30 and you're just cruising and looking around at the scenery. You don't have to do much. And that's actually good for you, right? Your soul gets to relax. You get to just exhale. And then at some point, the terrain changes and you're on a rocky, mountainous pass and it's very narrow and you have to really be on your game and focus. Now, you might get off that mountain pass and be on a country road again. But if your nervous system is still feeling like, well, that mountain pass was kind of traumatic, right? I'm still kind of attached to that amount of focus because, maybe even in that moment when you were on that mountain pass, you had sort of a scare, right? Nothing happened, but you had a scare. And now driving down this country road, you're gripping the wheel. You're not looking around at all. You're unable to enjoy the ride and your nervous system is on. And that's often how we go through life. We hold on to a formula that we did for a time because it worked. And now we fail to see, we don't even recognize like, oh my God, we're in a completely different landscape. The vista is now new. And life continues to unravel in this way, right? And it's going to continue to unravel. We're going to continue to be confronted with completely new landscapes that we've never mastered before, because why would we need to master something we've already mastered? We might need to go back and tweak things. We might need to go back and even rehash certain lessons. But by and large, the things that present themselves in our lives are new situations. And the approach that we take is going to be new. So formulas, they're useful tools. They can be so useful to help us understand how our bodies react to a certain thing, to a certain food, to a certain way of scheduling. But then that tool needs to become a tool in the toolbox, right? And your tools are infinite. So when you trust that you deep inside of yourself have really learned that tool, right? Like, you know how to schedule your time in power hours or time chunks. You don't need to stay attached to that. You can just pull it out when you sense that you need it. And that way, we can just put a little more space around our experience and maybe have a little bit more fun. Have a great day.